Welcome to Digging in the WWE Vaults, Episode 1. Dave and myself are trying something new because
Yes.
the Raw Vault has gone up on Netflix. WWE Vault, which we're going to get to eventually, has some great classic content on YouTube. So we want to cover both of them. But before we cover anything, we are going to cover Game Up Hard Hydration. It's like your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink came together, merged, became something so much better. Dave loves that rundown.
Oh, yeah. I love it, guys. We're talking about Game Up. We're talking about 4 great flavors in an 8-pack. Fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape. But most importantly, guys, not only is it full flavor drink, it's only 110 calories per can. So it's low carb. You don't have to feel guilty about enjoying Game Up. Just like you don't have to feel guilty about enjoying us or Raw.
We are getting into the first Raw on the Raw on Netflix, January 11th, 1993, the very first episode of Raw. Dave, were you watching that night?
Yes, I was.
I was as well, because I remember watching wrestling on Monday nights before that. And I'm trying to remember what it was before, because I remember definitely watching Raw and hearing there was a new... Now, did that ever have wrestling on that, or was that mostly talking?
I had wrestling matches.
Okay.
So the old primetime wrestling, they had Gorilla and Jesse, and then Gorilla and Bobby were kind of the team for a long, long time. But at some point, it became kind of a table setting where you had like Vince McMahon, I want to say Hillbilly Jim and Jim Duggan, Bobby Heenan and Mr. Perfect, and that led to Mr. Perfect and Heenan kind of splitting up at one point. There was this big segment, but that was primetime wrestling at that point. They would still pitch the matches in between when they would be talking about angles and stuff that was going on. But at some point, Vince McMahon talked about live wrestling. Everything was going to be raw. And I was like thinking like, what is this? And then, they got to the Manhattan. I loved it. I did not know, because I liked primetime wrestling. And, even then, as a youngster, I knew that WWF had a habit of sometimes being kind of showy and show business, and they would get away from wrestling. And I'd be like, oh, what's this going to be? What's this going to be? But it ended up being all live wrestling. So I was excited. Although the original Raw, I don't know if we're going to talk about this, is actually only a 1-hour show. And primetime wrestling was 2 hours. So it actually got cut a little bit at the time.
That's wild. I must have been watching primetime wrestling, because I remember watching, I don't remember how long it was, but I remember hearing about Raw and then seeing the first episode. And it started off great, because even though there was a lot of live wrestling on there was still the fair amount of shenanigans. And it started off with Sean Mooney doing the intro and Bobby Heenan trying to get into the building and not being let into the building. And this is a skit that's going to reoccur multiple times throughout this show. And it was fun because it gave it that WWF feel, but it also felt different kind of than anything that had come before.
So Bobby's entertaining in these. He's great. But I remember as a kid, it already got to the point where I really thought Bobby was entertaining, and I loved Bobby Heenan. I didn't care that he was a bad guy. I thought it was funny. And I remember thinking that I wanted Bobby on the show. So I was kind of mad, even though Bobby was supposed to be this heel. Like, I wanted Bobby on the show. And we'll talk about it. And now I have a appreciation in some ways of Rob Bartlett, who we'll talk about. But at the time, when you praised Bobby Heenan and Rob Bartlett, I'm like, what the hell is this?
And we'll get to it, because we were talking about how entertaining Bobby was. And it's funny because I watched this when it occurred. I have little to no memory of Rob Bartlett. And I just wonder if I had tuned him out that hard, because throughout this show, it didn't feel like a good fit to me. I didn't enjoy it. And then I'm like, how did I block this out of my memory? It sounds like you enjoyed him a little more.
I got a kick out of it now, because I realized how bad it was. Like, I'm just looking, I know maybe you want to go to the first match, but just here, are we going to talk about the first match? Because we might as well segue into that, because some of these Bartlett quotes they're so bad.
Well, hold on. Yeah, because the last thing I got is that these 4 guys preview the show. Yeah. And we're going to get to the first match, because this is where Rob Bartlett really starts off, and the ridiculous is early. Which is your favorite ridiculous Rob Bartlett quote to start off with?
Well, I like that he saw Coco Beware and he kind of wondered whatever happened to Gary Coleman. So that was also a good one. Let's see here. I believe he called him a couple times Yokozumo or Yokozuna. So that was also good.
I can believe that.
And then it was an ass like an amphitheater. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I believe that. I believe the quote might have gone, "That's one big butted Oriental.
Oh, yeah,
That's
that was the
Rob
one.
Bartlett talking.
Yep.
And then I believe he said ass like an amphitheater after that.
Yeah, that's Rob Bartlett. I mean, he was a
It's
character.
really
I
funny
look back.
because if I were Rob Bartlett, I don't know if I would have made the jokes about Yoko, having seen how he treated that one jobber in Memphis.
Oh, yeah. I would want to get on my bad side. Yeah, not a good idea.
No, definitely not. But this was a great early match to see. You know, obviously Yoko getting the win. This went into a commercial for the 1993
Right.
Royal Rumble, which I thought was very interesting. Like, I like the look of these old Raws. It brings me back to that time in wrestling where, you know, the graphics were this way and the TV was this way. Like, it really brought me back to being a young wrestling fan, and I enjoyed that. Do you remember the 93 Rumble much? Did
Yes.
you have a favorite match on it?
Yeah, actually, well, my favorite match on it would be on the cover, Bret Hart and Razor Ramon, because I was big into Bret Hart at this time. This is Bret Hart during his first WWF title reign, and Razor Ramon, Scott Hall, was really cooking in his WWF run here initially as a heel, and I was enjoying this. Ironically, Yokozuna, who won our first match here, he will be the eventual winner of this Royal Rumble, and he will challenge Bret Hart for the world title at WrestleMania 9. And the last person he's going to eliminate was one of the commentators. Not Rob Bartlett, but Randy Savage. It's kind of interesting just remembering how this all came about here.
Yeah, thinking back to this time in wrestling was wild because I remember when I was a kid, I thought WrestleMania 9 was the best. And it's funny how now looking back at it, it has, you know, such negative appeal at times. The next segment after this Royal Rumble 93 commercial was Bobby Heenan talking about the narcissist. And I could not find a graphic of Bobby Heenan from the episode. So I'm putting up this picture of Lex Luger. And it's funny because at this time, I don't think we knew that Lex Luger was going to be in this spot. So it was very interesting hearing them building up a new talent.
Yes. And instead of calling him, so Lex Luger was the narcissist, but I don't know, they just didn't know the word or something. He kept calling him narcissist. So unless they changed it, I do remember Lex being the narcissist, Lex Luger. But yeah, a narcissist, for people who don't know, is just somebody who thinks, you know, the world revolves around them and it's all about them. And that's kind of what Lex's gimmick was. And this is actually a picture from said WrestleMania 9 here. When he was coming out in his entrance, he was going to wrestle Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig here, I believe. That would have been his debut. So Bobby Heenan pumping up Lex Luger. We didn't know it, though.
Following the narcissist introduction here, we got the Steiner Brothers versus the Executioners. And this was prime 1993 Steiners. It's funny, when I was taking notes at first, I didn't even have the name of the other tag team because I didn't even feel like they mentioned them because these guys just got ragdolled. I love this match because, you know, we've talked on episodes before about our love of the Steiner Brothers.
So the Executioners, I was curious about this, were Barry Hardy, a enhancement wrestler, and Dwayne Gill, another enhancement wrestler. Gill also would go on to fame for being Gilbert, a parody of Bill Goldberg. So that was kind of unique. Cool to see the Steiner Brothers here in this era. I believe there's at one point, Doink the Clown is even seen in the crowd here. Matt Bourne. Interesting time in WWF right now.
Yeah, definitely. It was during this match, too, that Vince McMahon kept talking about Mitch Farrat heading to the WWF, WWE. Do you remember that ever happening? Because this feels like it might have been one of the, I mean, they might have done it in the 80s, but this is one of the earliest instances I can remember of them calling out somebody from the sports world to come to, you know, be in the WWF.
No, I don't remember this at all.
Yeah, and the Steiner brothers were set to take on the Beverly brothers at the upcoming Royal Rumble. This was followed by another installment, Bobby Heenan trying to get into the building. And I mean, this stood out as a classic moment with him dressed as a woman, just showing how great Bobby was at getting the laughs. And he didn't take himself too seriously in this time.
No, different time period as well, too. As I don't know if they would do this segment nowadays, but there's Bobby. You know, that's just that look of shock on his face that he got called out for this, which is tremendous.
Yes, and after this, they went to Vince McMahon talking to Razor Ramon in the ring, you know, getting that big interview in before the Royal Rumble. And you talked earlier about how Razor was picking up steam around this. this time. And
Yes.
this was just, this was a classic time frame for him. Probably, I'd argue one of the biggest that Razor ever was in WWF.
For sure. He's going to go on, he's not going to win the title here, but he'll get upset by the 1-2-3 Kid, which will actually end up being almost like a big thing for him too, because he'll get bigger and he'll eventually win on the Intercontinental Championship and have big runs there and really solidify himself as one of the top guys. Also here, they showed Razor attacking Owen Hart before as they got ready for the Royal Rumble. So, it was interesting to see, some of these people in the WWF at the time, and Owen Hart was referred to as the Rocket. So this was still back when Owen was probably, I think we're 1 year away from when Owen's going to eventually turn on his brother at the 94 Rumble. And we'll see him eventually become the King of Hearts. So here we are. We're just kind of laying the foundation for a lot of stuff in the future.
Yeah, setting up for that WrestleMania 10. And after Razor Ramon, they went to talking about Headlock for Hunger. This is not a clip from that TV, but I could not find something that was just the graphic. Because for this show, I tried getting as many nostalgic graphics as possible. But listen to this Headlock on Hunger ad, part of the Somalia Relief Fund.
Yes.
At Madison Square Garden, you're getting Mr. Perfect versus Ric Flair. Bret Hart versus Bam Bam Bigelow for the WWF Championship. Shawn Michaels versus Bob Backlund as Randy Savage calls it, because Randy Savage is reading this off and he goes, Shawn Michaels versus Backlund for another title, the Intercontinental title. You had Undertaker versus IRS, Macho Man versus Ted DiBiase. For 93, this is an amazing card, and I wouldn't doubt that they sold out the Garden and did good for Headlock for Hunger that night.
That is a good card for that era. You have some of the biggest stars wrestling each other, no doubt.
Yeah, this was followed by a Tatanka pre-tape, also talking about Headlock for Hunger. Great to see Tatanka in that time frame. Not one of my favorite wrestlers from the 90s, but one of those favorite characters that I enjoyed amongst the group. And the match that followed this was, it felt like the longest on this show. And this is really 93 here, isn't it? You have Max Moon, who I believe at the time was Paul Diamond, versus an Intercontinental Champion, Shawn Michaels. And what did you think about this match, Dave? This might have been my favorite thing on the show.
Yeah, I liked it because I remember this being Paul Diamond. I know Conan did the Max Moon character at some point. I don't know if it ever made it to TV or what the deal with that was, but Paul Diamond, Shawn Michaels wrestled each other. For those who don't know, Paul Diamond was part of a team called Bad Company with Pat Tanaka, former guest of the show, and they were managed by Diamond Dallas Page, which always was interesting to me because Diamond Dallas was bigger than both of his wrestlers, which was always interesting. And they actually won the AWA World Tag Titles from the Rockers, the Midnight Rockers at the time, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. But here we are, big match in 93, but we know who's going to win here. It's Shawn Michaels. He's on his way up. He wins here, but it is interesting just to know the history of these two.
Yeah, it was wild to see that streamers were thrown at the entrance. Doink was at ringside during this as well. And then Rob Bartlett does a Mike Tyson bit, which he keeps up for way too long.
Right.
And it might have, gone from funny, like annoying to funny, but I thought it just went way too long, and it was a bit insufferable.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, this was Bartlett. He was a bit much.
And what is that Raw phrase that they kept trying to get over during this? They tried making it sound natural,
uncooked, like uncensored.
What was it?
Was it the one where it was like, we're uncooked, we're uncensored, we're raw? Was that it?
Yeah, because it's like you saw Rob Bartlett try to do it, and then Vince immediately repeated it, but in the way that he wanted. And it was funny because you could tell that was the tagline they were trying to get over. Following this match, there was an ad for WWF Mania. And what's funny about this is because much like Rob Bartlett, this was Saturdays at 10 a.m. So I had to have been watching this, but I don't remember the name of the show, WWF Mania, at all. Did you remember this show? Because I remembered watching wrestling like Saturday mornings around 10 and Sundays, I believe we're going to talk about in a minute at noon.
I believe this was the Todd Pettengill show. Okay. I don't remember this ad on here, but I believe Todd Pettengill was going to be hosting WWF Mania. If he wasn't here already, this will be eventually the show he's on, and eventually he'll be doing a Live Wire, where they did have kind of a cool segment where they would call in once in a while, and they take call-in guests, and like I think Paul Heyman called in one time and stuff too. But then it just got kind of a recap show, like a lot of these Saturday morning shows in this time period became kind of recap shows.
I really liked it because it was just such a 90s commercial. Coming up next, they had Gene Okerlund in a Royal Rumble control center.
Yep.
And he showed there was a graphic because Shawn Michaels is going to be defending that IC championship against Marty Jannetty. They did a Shawn pre-tape. They did a Marty pre-tape. You had Mean Gene explaining the rules of the Royal Rumble. And then you had promos from Flair, Tatanka, IRS, Bob Backlund, Jerry Lawler, Mr. Perfect. There was a perfect pre-tape where he has no problems with everything because everything, and I ripped my paper to finish that sentence. Then you had Ted DiBiase, Crush, Rick Martel, Yokozuna pre-tape, and then mentioning Macho Man, Papa Shango, Earthquake, Berserker, Undertaker, Carlos Colon, Tenru is in this, Tito Santana, Typhoon, both head shrinkers, Hacksaw. This made me want to watch this Rumble mainly because I forgot about some of these guys in this time frame, and it just sounded amazing.
Yeah, because you still had Ric Flair here before he went back to WCW. He was on his way out, but he did do this Royal Rumble. You have the returning Mr. Perfect in this Royal Rumble. You know, like you said, guys like Savage, Yoga, but also the talent they brought in specifically just for this Rumble, Tenru and Carlos Colon. I mean, yeah, this was a very interesting Royal Rumble.
At one point, they say that the winner meets the champion at WrestleMania 9.
Right.
Was this the first instance of a winner of a Royal Rumble going on to take on the champion at WrestleMania?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It kind of felt like
the year before. The year before was for the vacant world title after what happened with Undertaker and Hulk Hogan at this Tuesday in Texas. So they did that, and then what they did this year was they wanted to set up the WrestleMania matches at the Royal Rumble, and it's been doing that ever since now. So here we are, 40 years later or whatever it is? 30? I don't know. 36, 33?
93, so that'd be 30.
32? Yeah, 32 years.
I'm not good at math, but I believe it's 32. I'm not good at math, but Bobby Heenan is great at disguises, even though Sean Mooney catches him again.
Oh, this
and
Uncle Morty.
This was, at this point, I'm just laughing. Once again, I don't know if you could do this in this day and age, but in 93, it's funny how Bobby Heenan has the perfect comedy style for this, and Rob Bartlett's doesn't seem to hit. I don't know if it's just because we're older men now. Maybe when we were younger, Rob Bartlett was hilarious.
Nah, I like Bartlett better now, and I don't care for him now, so... At least I have some appreciation for him now. I thought he was horrible.
Yeah, but it was great to see Bobby Heenan continuing this on. After this, there was a commercial for All American Wrestling, and I love seeing this logo. Can't say I remember anything from this show specifically, but Sundays at noon, I had to have been watching.
Yep, this was kind of a match where they'd be at the control center for most. This would be the show where they're at the control center for most of it. Gene would be talking with Bobby, and then you'd get some matches here and there too.
Yeah, and that was a Bobby Heenan, Gene Okerlund show, so that had to be great. They followed this up with highlights from that past weekend's WWE Superstars. This was, I think, the show I remember watching. Was Superstars also a Saturday show, do you remember?
It was in syndication. This was the big Saturday morning show. This and Wrestling Challenge for a while. Wrestling Challenge was Gorilla and Bobby, and Saturday Syndication Superstars was Jesse Ventura and Vince McMahon for the longest time. Around this time, it would have been Vince, probably Rowdy Piper and Randy Savage. Maybe Vince was at that point where he had those guys that were coming in and out. Like we had Bruce Pritchard as some cowboy named Reno something or other, like all these different people coming out. But this was Vince McMahon's baby for a while, was Superstars. This is the Kamala segment.
Main event of the first Monday Night Raw.
They showed stuff for Kamala, I believe, there too. I believe he was about to turn babyface with Slick, or is that later?
Oh yeah, that's what they had showed from Superstars. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. This was Kamala getting yelled at by Harvey Whippleman and pushed around by Kimchi, who I believe was the Brooklyn Brawler. And then Reverend Slick came to his rescue, and did Kimchi punch Slick, or did Slick punch Kimchi?
Kimchi had hit Slick, and that's when Kamala went after Kimchi. He had enough, and then I think he laid out Kimchi and then went after Harvey Whippleman, who was already hauling ass.
Yeah, so we got a new manager for Kamala here, so that was very interesting to remember because it's a lot of these things I forgot they happened until I see it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that angle. It's funny what the years do sometimes with that. The main event, Undertaker versus Damian Demento. Damian Demento, another guy that I had totally forgotten about. Not bad in this match here, but obviously this was an Undertaker showcase.
I forgot to look him up again. I remembered him. I think he was mostly a Northeastern, like, independent guy, but he got this gimmick where he would, like, talk to himself, and I think they had him beat a few enhancement wrestlers, but ultimately, you know, he was a lower mid-card guy.
Okay, yeah, definitely. It definitely felt like an early in the 90s character.
Oh, yeah.
I found it wild that this main event was under 5 minutes. Do you want to take a guess how long it was?
Oh, I don't know. It was under 5 minutes? I'll throw a number out there. 3:30.
2:27.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And it's funny because to me, I thought it was an effective main event that worked, and I had no problem with that at all.
That's funny.
And at the end of the show, they promoted, I believe it was Mr. Perfect, El Matador, Ric Flair, Papa Shango, Bret Hart. That's a good question. I don't know if they promoted that coming up for the Royal Rumble or no, I believe that's on next week's show because they also promoted Woody Allen versus Mia Farrow in a steel cage match. And this is very interesting given what we know about Vince now. Because Dave, do you want to brush the people up on the Woody Allen Mia Farrow story from that?
I don't remember everything about it, but it's they were getting a divorce, and was she a lot younger?
Who's that? His new girlfriend?
Yeah, Woody Allen's girlfriend. Was she like? Whoa, okay. Oh,
Mia Farrow,
so was his wife?
Yeah,
all right,
Mia
I don't
Farrow
know.
Was his wife. She might have been a little bit younger,
but he was cheating on her with a young girl. Then
who is the young girl though?
Oh, I don't remember. Young Asian girl, I feel like though.
You got that right, but it was also his adopted daughter.
I forgot that part. Oh wow, block that out.
That's why when I heard this, I was like, "Holy shit!" Like. You guys are going Raw on Raw.
Oh, man. Yeah, Vince trying to get some publicity.
And it's wild, too, because at the end, they mentioned that Rob Bartlett worked at WFAN. And that's why it's even crazier that I'm not familiar with Rob Bartlett. Because I used to listen to WFAN for Knicks games and talk radio in the morning on the way to school. So it's funny that he totally passed me by on that. But they ended the show, or one of the last segments on the show was Vince talking to Doink. There was a mention of Crush. Warning Doink. Crush comes out, threatens Doink. Doink sprays Crush with water and runs. I forgot this was even a feud, but I love seeing this era of Crush.
This is going to lead to WrestleMania 9 as well. This will be where the second Doink actually comes out at WrestleMania 9. Crush is going to give him the big claw Crush move on his head, and then here comes another Doink with a fake arm, breaks it over Crush's head, gives Matt Bourne the Doink to win, and we're off with multiple Doinks after that for years to come.
It was another great segment. They ended the show with Bobby Heenan and Sean Mooney once again outside. And, you know, Bobby Heenan's freaking out. Sean Mooney tells him it's okay to let him in. Like, just let him go in. And I thought that was the funniest way to end the show. And it showed when WWE was good about the sense of humor they had about things.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby was the man. Bobby's going to end up doing commentary on this show eventually anyway. It's this Bobby Heenan getting a small thing and still making the most of it and kind of being the star of the show.
That was episode 1. Next week, we are going to do episode 2, where we are going to choose the next episode on the Raw Vault on Netflix, but it is season 1, episode 3, January 25th, 1993. They're kind of jumping around with what they put on there so far. So we're going to go in order for a little bit, do some WWF Raws, and then went to maybe a more modern era. We're going to switch over to WWE Vaults. But when we're talking about what we're switching to, I will tell you one thing we are not switching away from, and that's Game Up Hard.
If you haven't tried Game Up, then you are missing out. Imagine your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink had a baby, but it's way better than that. Each can is 110 calories, low carb, 4.9 ABV. It's a nice light drink that is not light on flavor. Game Up comes in fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape. Pick it up at drinkgameup.com or at your nearest liquor store.
Author Ray Lopez presents Lockup, professional wrestling in our world. Lockup dives headfirst into the colorful world of professional wrestling. Explore the iconic characters, careers, matches, history, and families, and delve into the bizarre and fascinating entwining of professional wrestling and film, television, football, politics, gender, and race. Pre-orders are available now on Amazon.com or at MascotBooks.com. This is the perfect gift for the wrestling fan in your life. Pick up a copy today on Amazon.com or at MascotBooks.com.
All you got jump wrestling fans up there, listen, Old Black Bart has got a book. It's called Wrestle Black Bart. It's got some dead jump good stories in there about some dead jump good wrestlers.
Read stories of Dusty Rhodes, the Von Erich, Scott Casey, Sergeant Slaughter, Roddy Piper, Mr. Fuji, Ron Bass, Bruiser Brody, Mike Davis, the Grappler, and many others.
And I guarantee you one thing, that it'll be the best dadgum read you've had in a long, long time.
Get your book today at Russellville.com or on Amazon. Russellville, it's where wrestling lives.
Hey fans, it's the man they call Dave with producer Joe, and you probably know us as the commentary team for New Heights Pro Wrestling, but when we're not doing that, we got a podcast.
That is the Working Fans Podcast, where we talk pro wrestling, comedy, MMA, and so much more.
And tell them about that signature segment.
Oh, you talk about the 531?
You know I am.
That is a homegrown creation that has been our namesake. And if you want to know our namesake, we got Chevy, AJ Strange Brew, as well as the two of us.
And why don't you go to our channel, like, subscribe, show us some love.
Rate, review, all of it.
Read about the Northern Wrestling Federation in the book presented by Russellville.com, The Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 2. Hear the story of Roger Ruffin, the man who trained Carl Anderson, the Monster Abyss, Jordan Clearwater, Chris Harrison, Jillian Hall.
Plus 45 other short stories, including Jazz, Bobby Eaton, Kamala, Thunder Rosa, Mario Mancini, Scott Casey, PJ Black, Kerry Morton, Sal Renaro, Jeremiah Plunkett, Colby Carino, Bam Bam Malone, and many others.
Get your book today at Russellville.com. Russellville, it's where wrestling lives.